And just like that, I should hopefully be live, and according to YouTube, I am live indeed. So, excuse me for a hot second as I start streaming on Entropy, and it seems like that's already through, so fantastic. Switched myself to live chat from the very start, and I'm picking up this guy again, and I'm just gonna go with the flow. Today's a fast intro. I'll probably even remember to start the timer, which I have done. So, you know, the clock is ticking, the time is now, you're gonna die soon, etc, etc, memento mori, stuff like that. We are back to shading this guy, or rather texturing, because I have not even started shading yet. That's the wrong layer. Great start. Anyway, how is everybody doing today? There's no one in the chat, who am I kidding? Well, anyway, if you're watching this on the VOD or on the replay, hello. Welcome to another stream of consciousness, for lack of a better term, from yours truly. I shall rant about something, but before I figure out what to rant about today, I'll get myself on track with what I'm doing, because I think there's probably a better way to approach it than what I usually do, which is I usually start by talking and thinking about what to talk about, and if I do that, then it ends up my entire focus ends up going to that, and there's some silly nonsense happening in terms of the actual, you know, drawing, which is supposed to be at least somewhat important, you know, at least somewhat, at least to an extent. So, you know, anyway, they've got a decent texture, I feel like, to the front of this guy, but this plant is entirely flat, and so is this plant pot. Now, I don't know about texturing them. I don't know if there's definitely going to be a texture to the leaves, I think. So, like, at the very least, the leaves should be textured, but I think I'll leave the actual shading step for the next step. So, let's grab the vines and start maybe giving them a little bit of a texture. I think actually different colors for the vines as well. Not like this, because this is clearly shaded, but, you know, a different shade of green for some of these could, I think, absolutely help it stand out a bit. Because currently it's a bit of a hot mess. It's just spaghetti. You can't really distinguish between each line. Oh, there's this spider from yesterday. You came out of the corner, buddy. That was your first mistake. The second mistake was showing up in this room in the first place. Get dyed it, idiot. Okay, hold on. Gotta take care of this. Exclusive stream. You now have the pleasure of witnessing in audio format me murdering a spider that's been bothering me since yesterday. Yeah, that's what murder sounds like. Familiarize yourself. Anyway, now that that guy's taken care of, we can return to painting a plant in peace. Because there's a large moving spot on my ceiling. I wonder what that is, and it turned out to be an unsuspected visitor. And what do we do with unsuspecting visitors or unexpected visitors? That's right, we maul them and we put them in the trash. This is how I was raised anyway. So yeah, let's make these, you know, let's make each strand slightly different color. Maybe not each strand, but let's introduce like 2 or 3 colors. 2 or 3 different colors to the strands of this plant. I think that's gonna look better. Probably also fix stuff like this, where there's just a massive, you know, weird pile of... a massive blob of color where it shouldn't be any. Like this. Surely it's gonna benefit from actually being a shape and not, you know, a big green sausage. Now, for all the sausage, large green sausage enthusiasts in the chat, which there are none, but if you're watching this on the VOD and you are a green sandwich enthusiast, I mean sausage enthusiast, I sincerely apologize, but I hope you understand that this could not have continued any longer, so... Unfortunately, I had to take care of that. Remove it. Please don't cancel me on social media. I beg you. I would say I'll delete my my Twitter account myself, but I've never had one. Now I can't even browse Twitter anymore because they've disabled that. So, you know what? I see that as an absolute win. Thank you, Elon Musk. You're finally making the updates to Twitter that you should have been doing all along, which is turning it off. Now, will this make Twitter just fall off and disappear into nothingness? I wish, but I also doubt. So unfortunately, we'll probably exist in a world where Twitter is still a real thing for a while. But maybe one day they'll make a catastrophic failure of a decision and it'll all collapse and we'll all be very sad, by which I mean, of course, tremendously happy. Until that day comes, though, there's a good replacement, and that is just not going to Twitter. It's been working for me pretty well for 4 years now. I've never been active on my Twitter account. I've really only used it to post drawings, but over time I've just decided, like, no, dude. I want nothing to do with this platform. I think at the time Parler was coming out, so I hopped to Parler. And then I realized Parler is just for political hot takes, so I dropped Parler as well, and I switched to Minds, and I'm still on Minds because, well, it's got a nice blend of, you know, actual people, and then some conspiracy theorists, you know, some other people with, you know, all kinds of political opinions and non-political content. It's nice. It's cozy there. I like it. Please don't... Well, to be fair, that site... It's cozy in terms of the content being posted there, but in terms of the actual, you know, user interface of the app, there's plenty of things I'd have done differently, to the point where I've considered, you know, if I could maybe write my own client for it, just to prove that it could be less bad. So, these things are... It's really weird, the choices those devs sometimes seem to make. Like, for example... One day, you know, a wonderful new update was introduced, and that wonderful new update introduced something called the top highlight section. Now, you might wonder, well, how could this possibly be bad? It's just highlights is the best posts. Don't you want to see the best posts? Well, the problem with the top highlights section is it was collected from a certain period of time back. I don't know if it was specified, but it was more than today, and it wouldn't rotate through posts. It would just show you the highlights for that time, which, well, if you apply a bit of thought, and that bit of thought is probably more thought than these devs put into this, you would notice that, oh hey, doesn't that mean every time you open the app, because, well, we are still in the time period, you're probably going to be seeing the same posts on the top highlights section? And if you thought that, you would be correct, because that is exactly how it worked. There was no system to, like, mark them as read. There's no system to automatically mark them as read as you know, as you look at them. There was not even a system for marking them as read if you interacted with them. Just, you know, absolutely nothing. And so, you know, that made basically every time you wanted to open the app to see if somebody you followed has posted something new, it would show you the top highlights section again. And because you've already seen all the posts in that, you probably would like to, like, all you do is like, oh, well, I want to get to the stuff I want to see, so let me just scroll down. And, you know, you just scroll past it, and the next time you open the app, you also scroll past it, and that's continues for, like, the next day as well, depending probably on how many people you actually have on your followed list. And it made it a slightly large pain in the behind. Now, on desktop, you know, because mine's on desktop is just a website, there exist extensions to your browser that can mitigate this problem quite nicely, because you can inject custom CSS into the site, and use CSS selectors to hide the elements making up the section of top highlights, which is what I've done on desktop. But on mobile, well, on mobile you either use the mobile version of the website, which is actually kind of broken, or alternatively, you just pray the devs one day will actually reverse their mistake, which they did recently. They now allow you to actually hide the section. It's not hidden by default, but you can hide it by pressing 3 dots on it when it shows up and clicking "Don't show this in my feed." And it seems to be working so far. So that's one headache gone. But unfortunately, there's more headaches like this. So basically, the app, the whole Minds like idea, which I completely do not care about at all, is they've got some cryptocurrency running behind the whole site, and you can get rewarded with crypto for like posting and generating engagement, I think. And then you can also use that crypto like Minds tokens or USD or cash to buy views on the site, essentially. And well, that means you've got ads, basically got ads from other Minds users, which is, you know, granted, it's less bad than most corporate ads, but it's still ads, which I just despise. But you might think, yeah, sure, that's not too bad. Surely there's not too many of those. It's like, well, you know, it's ads, so to me, basically any amount is too many, but okay, it's not too bad. But the problem is, when you start noticing your feed has, you know, these boosts, you might also start noticing that your feed also has other things. So your feed will have a recommended channels section. Your feed will also have some sort of additional question to complete some questionnaire I don't care about. Your feed will also have an advertisement for Minds Plus. Your feed will also have some kind of bloody setting from something else, for something else, I think, like identify yourself, or like verify your identity, which I also don't care about. And because I'd like to, you know, see the 3 or 4 new posts the accounts I follow have posted, when I scroll through the feed, which thankfully the default option is still reverse chronological, so I can actually see the posts and it's not some weird algorithm. But every time I do open this to actually see the stuff, I am scrolling past a fair bit of just random irrelevant garbage, which makes, you know, in terms of a social media network where the whole point is basically to look at content, having to look at like half of the content I look at is content I do not care about in the slightest. It's like, it's not the greatest, you know? Not the greatest experience. Just saying that. So, you know, it's maybe not the most, not the greatest and most advanced and epic, you know, Turbo Gaming Deluxe social media experience, but that's also kind of nice, because honestly, there's less of this sense of somebody constantly preying on your every sense just to, you know, squeeze attention out of you, like the last little bit out of a toothpaste tube, you know. So, you know, I think probably if they one day decide to go back on the idea that you know, we should have reverse chronological, as in you can actually see all the posts. If they one day decide to throw that away in favor of a worse system like an algorithm on the main page, I'll probably drop Minds and never look back. It's, you know, it's just, I don't ask for much. I don't ask for a lot, but this is one feature it's pretty much a deal breaker to me. It's like, don't make your website stand in between me and the stuff I actually want to see. Just please don't do that. It's really annoying. And most websites, well, I suppose the business model is just coming back to bite them, if you think about it, because wasn't the business model. Basically, we'll get a bunch of users, and then I guess at some point we'll figure out how to monetize them, and then you monetize. What you monetize is the attention of the users, but when you monetize the attention of the users, well, the users originally gave you attention for a reason, right? I, for example, showed up to somebody, to Minds, and I'm giving Minds attention because there's people on there posting stuff I'm interested in, and so I'll take all the stuff that Minds adds on top of that. I'll take it just to be able to interact and get stuff from people I want to see from and hear from. But at a certain ratio of just stuff I don't care about to stuff I actually do, you get into the territory of, well, I don't care anymore. Just leave me alone. And Facebook has certainly, like ages ago, Facebook has just absolutely whizzed past that that barrier, and essentially Facebook has established itself as a site that is not interested in the slightest of letting me see the information I want to see. Like Facebook in its whole design is just, Facebook is for Facebook, The user on Facebook is to generate money for Facebook, and just the whole design of the application, the way it's done, the way it changes, the way they approach it, it's clearly not done with the user in mind, which has caused me to essentially just stop using the app entirely. Facebook always has had these weird random changes to the UI, which each part of the website doesn't feel like it connects together. This, I think, has changed with the redesign a bit, but there's probably still the same approach where you basically A/B test really hard. A/B testing is where you push out two different versions of the application you have at the same time, and you find out how users react to both of them, and basically use that information to make changes to the app so it goes more how you'd like it to go. So Facebook has been doing that very aggressively, where it's you could notice even the website changing for you multiple times, very frequently. You could see that there's different UI versions. There's everything slightly shifts every time you open the site. It's hard to get used to because it all changes all the time. And that probably is there for Facebook to just maximize how much of your attention it can grab, figure out how to do it. Probably, like, not even in a conspiracy theory sense, even if it sounds like that, but that's just their business model. Like, they are selling your attention to other people, so it makes sense for them to figure out how to best grab your attention and direct it to things they would like you to consume instead of the things you may have initially come to to take. So that design has never been for the user really, but it's become just painful. But the thing is, there's certain platforms which exist because they exist. Facebook Messenger over here seems to be somewhat like that. Where it's like, well, why do you use Facebook Messenger? Well, I use it because everybody else uses it. And that's like that for basically every person. Right? And then they bought WhatsApp, which was like the main alternative. And now, if you'd like to not use Zuckerberg's family of products, well, you'll have to switch to Signal, for example, or Telegram. But surprise, surprise, if you'd like to do that, well, then you will, it's a messaging app. So if you'd like to use a messaging app, you have to have the other people to message. And where are all the other people you'd like to message? Well, they are on Facebook/WhatsApp. So what are you going to do? Well, probably going to stay using those. Or you're going to be that one guy in your friends group who's just getting people to switch, and everybody hates that because people don't like change very much, including me. I'm not a massive fan of changes. It's particularly annoying to have to do that, but I think the sooner you start getting people used to this, the better. Maybe a solution to this is some kind of unified client which can handle multiple ways of communication. and like sync between them. If you could maybe, you know, join a group in one app, and it somehow takes care of, you know, setting stuff up for you so you don't have to, well, maybe then more users that don't really care, and that's a lot of, if not, it's probably the majority of users, is just users who don't care and just want an easy to use to set up experience. Maybe something like that could help get these people on board with actually using software that's a bit less predatory. Perhaps, you know, that's something. It's not very easy to get people to switch of their own volition without any kind of prompt or helping hand. It's like usually people don't react well to something new, and also I've noticed that, for example, my perspective or perception of what is easy and intuitive in a computer application is very much not at all representative of the general public, which makes sense. I spend a lot more time on a computer than the average member of the general public, but still, the disconnect is quite shocking if you encounter someone using a computer, for example, who doesn't use it often. Like, the speed at which they do everything is so much lower than something I, for example, would be used to, just by virtue of how often and how much I do on a computer, right? But this goes further, because this is not just, know-how of like particular specific things. There is also an understanding. So, understanding what the difference. You might think it's fairly simple, fairly easy to figure out what the difference between a piece of paper and a computer is, right? Surely you would think that's no, that's pretty easy. One does the beep boop and keyboard and mouse, and the other one is the paper. It's just paper. But the thing is, once you look beyond like the superficial, whatever the way of interacting with it, there's a lot of differences in thinking when solving problems using computers and solving problems using your human brain and, pieces of paper and such. And that difference is not at all easy to explain to people, and especially not easy to people who are not computer savvy. There's a certain way of thinking attached to it that you have to, change in yourself to be able to comprehend certain details and certain ways of organizing stuff. Like, for example, how you no longer have a need for manually calculating certain things. As long as you input the data correctly, the computer will do the calculation. But if you've been applying a certain rule, and part of that rule is just to calculate something, and now there's a machine calculating it for you, well, then you might think, well, how is this not breaking the rule, right? The rule of my behavior, the rule that governed what I did, included computation, which I did on a piece of paper, right? So, you might start thinking, and this is pretty much a real example, it's like people start thinking, well, how do we see what the computer is thinking, right? So to check it. And then that spawns certain visualization attempts that are pretty unnecessary, but, somebody that's not very computer minded has thought about it, so now it has to be done a certain way. So now have to show the computer thinking, and just good luck. You have to show it somehow. Somehow just do it. And for people who are computer savvy, you wouldn't think to necessitate the showing of the process going on inside of the computer in some way, because it's really just pointless, especially in a system that is entirely controlled by one person, or a bunch of people that have exclusive access. Like, in terms of computer systems, there's evidence. Basically, no matter what evidence you produce, you are still at the mercy of the programmers, unless you can, review all the code and make sure there's nothing in there And even then, you have to make sure there's no bugs in there, or maybe there's no exploits that are not necessarily intended but still can lead to a result that would be identical to somebody changing something intentionally. It's like with all of that, a computer is just very, very different. And a way of thinking to solve problems using a computer is also very different. It's like, on one hand, you've got, explaining things to a computer is particularly difficult because computers don't really speak human language. Like, well, ChatGPT is, I suppose, the closest we've gotten with that in terms of computers speaking human language. Like, it's pretty much, it's able to do stuff, but that's still far away from actually making a whole application that isn't generic. Like, maybe it'll write Snake for you, sure, but that's not very impressive. There's probably thousands of Snake clones on the market that you could, entirely copy and paste, and even like mishmash them together probably to get a more believable result of it not being copy and pasted. But something entirely new, and especially something specialized to solve a particular problem of a particular client, that's way further away. That's because there's more to communication and more to understanding of systems and designing them and how humans communicate and how humans work on stuff. There's far more to that than language. Language is kind of how you express it outside of yourself. But before you can express a thought in language, you have to have it thought out to a degree enough for it to actually be conveyable in a language. And even after you convey it in a language, you have to make sure what you've conveyed is actually accurate to what you wanted to convey. That is not at all an easy task, and that is actually where a lot of experience and a lot of know-how goes in terms of designing software. It's like, because your client, you are the programmer, or rather you are the system designer, and well, you might know how to design a system, but the guy you are talking to, who you are making a system for, probably doesn't, because he's not done it, because that's why he's hiring you, right? So for that guy to understand, so that guy's gonna have a certain need that he's going to express to you. Like, he's going to tell you, well, I need this to be done faster. For example, maybe this process we are losing something on, this needs to be controlled better. Maybe I can't calculate this manually anymore. He's gonna have a certain need, but that's only step one of the process. There's step one, is where you gather those requirements and you get an understanding of what the client actually needs. But, after step one, you have to take, a step back. You gather all this stuff, you like connect it. You want to take a step back and you want to really think about, is what this guy's telling me he wants actually true? As in, does he actually need this and is this actually going to solve his problem? Because, he's expressing something to you, but it's not like it's gospel. He's kind of guessing, he's kind of tried to do some thinking on his own. He's arranged it in a certain way. He's already probably been solving the problem in some way, in reality. So he's also projecting how that works onto how a computer system would work. And now it's your job as a system analyst or like a business analyst or a system designer. Now it's your job to untangle whatever you've been given from the client into something that is, actually software shaped. As in, you want to make sure you are answering his needs, but not necessarily the needs he has actually spoken of. Now, how much of that process could be AI automated? It's like, I don't know. It's like, well, so far, our quote-unquote AI is basically, a nice way to understand our inputs in natural language and translate them to some kind of response, right? That sounds correct to most people, as long as you are not very knowledgeable in that thing. Well, nah, it nails some stuff as well. I can't do it that dirty. It's like, we've got that, sure. Like, how does that map onto things that are like before and after and come through from language that are not... It's like the problem when you are talking with a client, the problem you are solving isn't in the language the client is using. The problem you are solving lies in a certain reality that the words are trying to describe. Now, the words are trying to describe that reality probably badly and probably from a side that isn't essentially clear. And the way, the place where the designer comes into this whole process is the designer kind of wrangles all these thoughts that the client expresses and tries to, pull them together and pull a coherent picture out of that, and then turn that picture into something that could be programmed into software. And this process is, adding a lot of additional input from the side that might result in something that looks nothing like what the original thoughts of the guy in need were. And I'm not exactly sure that our language models can do that, because I think that's not, that's going to give you probably a generic solution. There's going to be maybe applicable generally, but how it's going to solve a particular case for a particular thing that's not been done before is a mystery. But maybe it's going to actually get so good at finding things that people have done before that, once you actually do it, like nobody else on the planet has to solve this problem, because it's just going to, yoink your code and then use that to solve this problem for everybody else. So, long story short on that, I don't actually know how that's gonna go, but I'm skeptical. I'm definitely skeptical. All of this emerged from like how you process things, I think, as a system analyst, system designer. That also came out of somewhere. But you know what? If there's one thought I'd like to continue on this, it's probably the more than just language thought. I'm gonna pretend I didn't lose my train of thought and just, begin again with that. So, if I'm thinking about certain concepts, like I was, for example, coming back home before the stream, I'm thinking about certain concepts, in my head. I'm having thoughts, and then when I talk about them, I kind of give the thoughts some sort of shape. So I mold them using language into something that somebody that is not myself can actually understand. And the whole reason of understanding is to build the thoughts in the person who is listening to me. The thoughts I had originally, for them to be able to be reconstructed on the receiving end of the message. So if I have a certain thought, I formulate it in a certain way, then I want to convey that way to somebody else, and I want that somebody else to be able to figure out, it's like, oh, that's what he meant. I get it, right? It's like, he meant to convey that, I don't know, his left leg hurts him badly. So, that's why he placed himself on the floor and was like rocking back and forth, holding his leg. That's because that's what he wanted to convey, right? It's like, okay, he's done it, right? He's got it, he's conveyed it, and the receiver of the message has kind of confirmed, like, yeah, this was good. I understood what this guy actually meant by what he was doing. So you want to be able to convey thoughts to other people like this through language, but that conveying can only happen after you've already done a bunch of setup and prep in terms of the message, before you've even started talking. So like you need to have some kind of thought formed inside of your head to actually convey it. Or like at the very least, if not a whole thought, well, maybe you have a certain feeling you'd like to convey, and you know that's, I think, where the more emotional art comes from. It's like this feeling, I've got like this feeling, and I want this feeling to be conveyed through my work, and I'm gonna kind of do what feels right. Right? You are still conveying certain information. It's just this information is a bit different in nature to people usually. I've started focusing on this tree a bit more, so I'm kind of disorganized at the moment. Point is, you wanna be capable of forming thoughts, and you want to be capable of conveying them to other people, but it's also important to not kind of get lost in forming the words and the communication, especially if you have like a perfectionist streak in you. Like I definitely have something like that with how autistically I can just go over and over on detail. I think is probably acceptable to most people. If you have that, you might be tempted to form the perfect message or the perfect format to convey a message to someone else. And the thing is that kind of it's easy. It's like, not saying that you necessarily will do this, but you could very easily forget what the point of it all is. It's like the point of this stuff is to convey messages to other people. And if you forget this point, then your communication is pointless. Which, well, kind of an oxymoron, but you get the idea, right? The communication becomes pointless if you forget why you are doing it. It's important for you to keep in mind that you want to relay some information to another person, and that means you can take certain shortcuts. And even because we actually exist, in time, and nobody has unlimited time, as far as I'm aware, it's actually almost necessary to shorten the message and to rely on certain mechanisms in the recipient to actually decode what you've said. So idioms are like that, right? You convey an idea in the form of an idiom, and whoever is listening to you actually understands what that idiom means and can translate it back to the original meaning without you having to actually use all the words necessary to explain it from scratch. Which I think coincidentally, or maybe not coincidentally, is probably the bad way to say it, but this is why a shared culture is important, because it's extremely important for actually conveying information in an effective fashion. Because without those shortcuts, well, you have to every time do everything from scratch, which is something you actually see in stuff like internet debates, for example. You have a lot of the time you've got your people who feel like they've never, they are so disconnected and detached from how you think, or you are so disconnected and detached from how they think, you can no longer have this, bond of just shared terms and values and things you can exchange, and instead have to, define everything, go back down, drill to the basics. And I think at a certain level of this disconnect, you just can't possibly form a coherent thought with that other person, because anything you say is basically turned into but what's that? Yeah, but what is this? Like, what's the point? And stuff like that. And you end up with a conversation that doesn't go anywhere, that is frustrating for both parties. And at the end, you are left with left no better than you started. And that's obviously a massive waste of time. It stems from those shortcuts. And this is also connected to how you want to be careful about how you form messages, but not too careful. Right, so the kind of way I think it's a similar kind of thing in UI design as well, because sometimes you are tempted to. This is especially for applications like work applications and stuff. It's like those. If you've done design, you've probably come across guidelines and like guideline systems. So you've got certain things you are supposed, quote unquote, to do, and to, there's certain layouts you're supposed to have. Certain things are supposed to not be done ever, basically. But I think at a certain level of designing interfaces, and especially under time constraints and in specific circumstances, you learn how to effectively break those rules. As in, the way you could maybe think about it is you learn the underlying reason for the rule, and then you no longer follow the rule in the same way anymore. I think this is also somewhat biblical, because in this little thick book called the Bible, there's something about how it's basically the New Testament. There's Jesus talks a lot about this idea in the New Testament. It's like the idea that you've gotten so lost in fulfilling the law as it's written that you've completely forgotten the reason why it was written. So now what you are doing is kind of hollow. It's no longer applicable and no longer makes sense to be doing what you are doing because of this, because of this complete disconnect you now have. So this idea, and I've kind of lost my train of thought again, but this idea of adhering to the meaning, I think I've lost it. I think I'll need to pick it up from another place. Side note, I'm kind of learning how to do a tree at the moment, so, bear with me. I'm testing some things out. Trying to maybe build something that's gonna look any way, shape, or form decent. I think I'm somewhat succeeding. Maybe. I guess time will tell when I get closer to actually getting this done. No. I think this looks pretty nice. This is starting to approach the appropriate level of chaos and entropy that a tree should have, while at the same time maintaining the overall blob shape we all know and love about trees. Now you might be asking, what the hell am I talking about? And that is a perfectly valid question. I have no idea either. Damn, I wish I had my train of thought again, but that's okay. It's left the station. We are gonna have to deal with what we have now. So, where did I get to the idea of following the spirit and not the letter? Because that's been certainly rolling around in my head for a while now, and a lot of it is because I think we've kind of, the world we live in, or at least the world I see around me, has a lot of this. This trait is very widespread inside of it. There's a whole lot of things that are followed, on the letter level, that make absolutely no sense, but it's the law now. Why is it the law? Well, we made it the law. Why did we make it the law? Well, who cares, really? Nobody asks this question even. Why are you asking this question? Well, There's actually a very specific and simple reason for why I'm asking that question, and I am asking that question because it's absolutely painful to deal with this. And it's painful because I can kind of, because a lot of the time you can kind of, by looking at what someone's produced, you can deduce what went into it. Like this applies to art, but this also applies to basically anything anyone has put together. You can kind of take a peek at how certain what choices were made, how they were made, how they affect the overall thing. Maybe the context of like where is the author from, what has the author experienced, how's this, what's the format, what's this form usually used for. Variables like that you can take a look at, and you can probably take a fairly accurate guess as to why certain things are the way they are. And if you confront this with a person who's just gotten used to how the rule is applied, and then you try to, go beyond the scope of this little procedure they follow, you might end up with a very fruitless conversation, because you're talking to someone who just fundamentally doesn't understand what you are talking about. It's like, that classic internet meme of like two guys looking at a number on the floor. One is looking at it from one side, and the other is looking from the other side. One is saying it's a 6, the other is saying it's a 9. It's like the idea is that, you could have two interpretations of the same reality that are both valid from a different perspective. But this is kind of different. This is kind of like having a guy who's been looking at a 6 on the ground for a very long time, and over time, the 6 has been like morphed, and there's been lines added to it, and old lines have been kind of shifted around, and generally like this stuff has happened, and now the 6 looks way more like an 8 than a 6, right? But because the guy has been very used to saying this is a 6 for a long time, he's still going on about this being a 6. And now, if you come in from the outside and you look at the initial intention, right, or maybe, you take a look at that, a critical look, and you say, well, yeah, this was supposed to be a 6, but now it's an 8, right? The context has changed, or maybe, this is no longer, I need something that is a 6, and this is no longer applicable because it's changed. But then the guy, who's been looking at this 6 his whole life is going to tell you how, no, this is a perfectly fine 6, and you should use it, and it's good. Is maybe not even going to understand like how you could possibly not be satisfied with something he's known for his whole life, and it worked a certain way. It was a certain procedure he followed, and he got good results out of it. So it's like, you are now, like, congratulations, you are now kind of detached from, this guy, who might be someone who, for example, came before you, or maybe might be someone who actually has influence over your life. Or maybe it might be someone important to you. And now how do you take that person with you into the new reality, and how do you show them that, well, my needs are actually different, this is not working because stuff like that. It's a lot of little conundrums, I think, to kind of solve. And it's that's I'm kind of scatterbrained about this, and that's kind of why I like these streams, and I just really like talking in general, because it lets me kind of lay these things out. Because maybe this is a very autistic way to approach life. Certainly a thought that's, been in my head before. But I feel like not many people are doing this. I feel like I'm more, pardon the, I'm so special and unique, and I'm, the specialist of snowflakes and stuff like that. But Like really though, I feel like what I'm doing is not very common. Maybe this is a matter of not having talked to enough people, or maybe this is a matter of not being able to kind of get this stuff out of people. Maybe there's, maybe it's, as the kids say these days, maybe it's a skill issue on my part, perhaps, but generally I feel like I think too much, almost. It's like the level of like certain theorization and concepts I just roll around with in my head. It's like, just chill, bro, calm down. Not rocket science, you don't have to approach it this way. But then on the other hand, I don't really know how to do it in another way. Like, part of this drawing stuff I do is kind of trying to connect with my more intuitive side, that I'm trying to figure out how to listen to what my brain is telling me in my subconsciousness, more than I'm trying to find out how to, do something on the intellectual level. So, for example, as I'm drawing this tree, I'm trying my best not to think about it too much in terms of does it make logical sense for this tree to be a certain way, and I'm trying to think more in a way of well, what feels right about this? So it's like how I was making those adjustments to the kind of leaves, the blob that's representing leaves. It's like I was trying my best to go for something I thought, well, okay, this looks right. This feels like the adjustment I should make. I'm trying to figure out kind of these intuitions that come to me, because they come to me and I think I should be in tune with them. I think that's pretty important generally in life. Be it listening to God, you could call it intuition, you could call it your subconsciousness processing information better than you can do it consciously. Whatever you call it, point is, there's a part of your mind that is kind of slightly outside of you. There's certainly a part of my mind that is certainly outside of me, and I think because of how much in my own head I've been, there's a lot of that part of my brain is kind of neglected, and I feel like this kind of stuff is just helpful to figure stuff out. Kalos, Tremming, Jam, Sagini, Jelas, Bellum, Ada, Nonton, La, Neo. That's... So, spoiler alert, I do not understand that language, if you couldn't tell by the absolutely horrible pronunciation of that I've just performed. So, if you can communicate in English, I'd much appreciate it. If you can't, well, hopefully, if you can't communicate in English, then me talking about this is probably fairly pointless. But you could click the emoji in the chat in the bottom right corner that YouTube has added at some point. I'm sure that's gonna help with something as I work on more textures for this guy. Can you draw anime style? Well, I've not really tried a lot. Not really tried a lot of anime style. I kind of feel like there's a lot of that style out there. Basically, like, everyone's trying to do anime, and a lot of it looks somewhat samey to me. No offense. So I'm kind of trying to figure out my own thing. Finding out how to do stuff. Maybe I'll do something anime style. The closest I do is probably like the chibis I do sometimes. These could be kind of interpreted to maybe be somewhat anime styled, ? Maybe. But yeah, in general, I'm very interested in drawing anime style. So if that's something you'd like to see, then you're probably not on the correct channel for that. Sorry. But if you'd like rambling about various things in life and other things, as I color in random blobs, then you're more than welcome to, you know, to continue staying. Continue staying. That is very sensible. Yeah, this kind of rambling, you know. There's also a massive problem with me. Anytime I read chat, I become completely distracted and lose my entire train of thought, which I think I finished the previous train of thought at least. Hopefully, or maybe not. I do not know. But whatever it was before, it's now lost. Unfortunately, happens. Sometimes you just, you know what? Sometimes you just learn to accept stuff. It's like things come and go, and sometimes you're just not gonna enjoy something, or sometimes it's gonna pass you by, and that's alright. Which is, you would think it's maybe obvious, but we kind of are in the FOMO age, which FOMO stands for fear of missing out. There's definitely a lot of that. It's like a bit hard to... it's a bit hard to kind of let this go. It's like there's a lot of things you might want to be engaged with, a lot of things you might want to invest time in and pay attention to, and it's very easy to feel like you're missing out if you are not keeping up with some of it. Kind of learning to just let go and live in the moment and do, like, I'm just unteaching myself multitasking essentially. I've basically stopped doing it. Aside from very few scenarios where I'd actually do multitasking. It's like basically limited to like boring work that I don't need any brain power to engage with. So like something in the vein of, I don't know, cutting a, what are these things called in English? Shrubs, I suppose. Like cutting shrubs, not very, you know, brain power heavy job, heavy work. I can do it, you know, listening to something I'd like to listen to anyway, but generally just tried my best to actually I'm from Indonesia, so I don't really understand what you are saying, but I still like your picture. You know what? Thanks. You know, I almost said greetings from Indonesia, but that doesn't exactly translate. I don't know how to say it, but you know, interesting. Well, at least I'm glad you enjoy the drawing. You know, this is the visual language is a language you can kind of appreciate past the language barrier. You know, you can just look at it and be like, oh, that's a plant. I have those. Unless you are from Mars, I guess. If you are from Mars, you might have trouble identifying plants, but then if you were on Mars now, you'd probably still somewhat remember Earth, so kind of a moot point. I really am rambling about the most nonsensical stuff, am I not? That's alright. It's all good. Oh. Actually, yeah, I'm keeping that texture. Trying to keep in mind, this is just a texture step. I'm hoping to actually shade this later, and shading is slightly different from texturing, as in I am not actually trying to model light on the surface yet. I'm trying to actually establish what the surface would look like without any light, and then later add light on top of that once I understand the texture. So that I've kind of been the tree is kind of slightly different. But I think it also could use a layer of shading, so I'll find out. I'll figure it out. For now, I'm trying to just, you know, construct a bunch of funky looking stuff on top of all the stuff I've already had. So like I've had flats, and I'm trying to add some textures. Now then, on top of the textures, I'm gonna try and add shading, and that's hopefully gonna be done at some point. Because you know what? One day it would be nice to actually finish something I've started on the stream instead of you know, putting it to the side and starting a new thing on another stream, which I might have done a couple times over the days. It's like, and the main project I'm doing usually is the like large city, and that large city is well, that large city is kind of an ongoing thing for a long while, so that's not gonna yield a finished product anytime soon, just by the nature of how big it is. So, you know what, maybe I'll finish this guy, and this will be a kind of first finished thing on the stream, which is nicer than, which is a bit more effort than the doodles I do, because the doodles, you know, the doodles are nice and fun. I like doing them a lot, but I also am trying to avoid stagnation, and I feel like doing stuff I'm actually good at constantly is probably a great way to ensure that I'll just, you know, stagnate into one thing. So what do I do immediately after that? Well, I try to I'll try my hand at something like this, which is something I don't do, which is lineless. It's got a bunch of textures and a bunch of shading later also on it. There's gonna be, so like, I just throw myself out the window into something I don't exactly, you know, feel very good at, and I see what happens. And so far it's been going decently well, I'd say. This is too dark. Is this a good texture? I don't know if this is a good texture, but it's gonna also have shading, and it's kind of, maybe for some stuff like this, shading could be useful, because this is gonna have a little lip around it. So that should probably kind of inform how the texture looks as well, because the texture is gonna be, of course, different on the lid, or rather on the like rim around, and different on the bottom. But like, anyway, let's pretend this is a like plant pot texture. Guess it could work, maybe, perhaps. Could also add some more texture to these vines, but I might skip that. Now, do I give this guy hair texture is a question. You know what? We can always duplicate the layer, hide the copy, and then try seeing what a hair layer would look like for him. Because I also don't want to make the, you know, this guy's hair just completely dark, so there's that to keep in mind. But then also it has to look like hair, but then also it has to kind of not be too harsh in colors. But then also I'm using a pixelated brush, which the definition of this brush is basically harsh borders between colors. It's like down to pixels if you zoom in. So in short, probably want to try it out, and I think it already looks better than it did, so it's probably staying. I think this little bit of thing could use some proper textured, you know, imagine like if that was a transparent texture, like these would actually be using the thing instead of the blob I had there before. Just make sure the hair isn't sticking out too badly in weird places, and we should be Gucci. Now, you know what? Certain things just don't look very good, but that's fine. As long as the, you know what? I was about to say as long as the end product looks good, but not really. It's pretty much as long as you've learned something from it, it's not a waste of time. And because you can learn from pretty much anything, as long as you've put in the effort to, you know, understand your mistakes and improve on them later, you've basically life hacked any kind of situation to not be, I need this hair to be more blobby than it is. Like it can have these shaves, but it needs to be more generally blobby. Like this is a life hack to avoiding feeling like you are constantly wasting your time. the life hack is to always learn. It's like, worst case scenario, yeah, you've wasted some time, but at least you've learned like 5 things from it, or maybe 1 thing. But as long as there's something, and the thing about that something is, like, you are not gonna change the situation post factum because it already happened, but what you can change is you can change what you take from it. So if it was a particularly bad experience, well, you can't undo the bad experience, but what you absolutely can do is you can focus on, what about this experience I could maybe learn from? What can I get from it? How can I become better at either what I'm doing or just better as a person from doing it? Okay, so how about we say this is a decent idea for a start, and we start maybe thinking about shading this guy, shall we? So I think hair, I think the hair is an improvement. Not fully sure about this, but I hope it is anyway. So how would I go about shading this guy? Do I go for like a palette of shades, or maybe I should try and adjust the colors on this before I start shading it, because I feel like some of them don't quite go well together. So perhaps one of the things I'd change is this. How does this look if I up the saturation? That's a bit too saturated. If I down the saturation, that's not enough. Maybe I just need to make it brighter, or maybe a contrast more. Let's try levels. Actually, levels are probably not the best idea. Maybe this is more like the shading step on the tree, but the tree is kind of special in this regard. The tree kind of has to have, look, that made those almost white. But yeah, the tree kind of needs that step of shading to be very similar to the step of texturing. Yeah, I think this is better in terms of the color sharpness. Yeah, this is very dull compared to this, and this is probably not even going far enough. I'm gonna try and adjust curves and see what happens. Like, see, this is like overly saturated for sure, but something like this, if it was slightly shifted in, like, these are closer to the colors this probably should have. Just don't overdo it, and then don't make this full bright white. We're gonna manipulate this further in another window, like maybe desaturate it a bit. Like you see that stuff. I'd like it to be a bit more saturated, then lighten the whole thing slightly. Something like that, yeah. Yeah, this is already better. And then the foreground layer should probably receive a similar treatment. So maybe something like this, but slightly less aggressive on the light colors. This is like the extreme, but I don't want to have it be extreme. Maybe something like this. Now, this, I think, is also a decent baseline for the rest of the thing, of the drawing, because I want to kind of match the intensity of the light and shadow and the colors on the rest of this guy. I think the sweater might be a decent start. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna try and figure out how I can attach the alpha of this to the bottom. Surely there's a way to lock the alpha onto the alpha inheritance ? Is it this? I think it is, right? That's alpha inheritance. Like it's on this layer, but it can't go outside of that. Okay, sure. Yeah, so in terms of shading, what I could do is I could do something like this, right? Wait. What? Is it inheriting alpha from the group? So if I do that, and this is alpha inheritance. Yeah, okay. So one thing I could do for the shades is I could, introduce a shading layer like this, shade with a completely different color, and then use blend modes to kind of, connect the dots. As in, if I fill all of this with a blue color, and later I switch the blend mode, well, I can figure out how that looks. Now, I'm not a massive expert on blend modes, but I know the general gist of them, as they change how pixels are combined when overlaid on top of one another. So, we can hopefully use that to our advantage slightly. Yeah. So if something like that, we got like the spaces on the model, on the character, that should be darker, and from that I could use a different blend mode to kind of put this together. So like you see those different filters you can do. It's like, look, divide, you've got multiply. Multiply is like the darkening shade. So if I wouldn't, the simplest thing is probably to do multiply, right? And do the dark, do an intense blue, and then manipulate this to leave it, because multiply. Okay, so slight tangent about multiply. So multiply, colors are represented by 3 components, right? You've got your reds, and from 0 to 255. You've got your green from 0 to 255, and you got your blue from 0 to 255. Now, each pixel in the source image has, these 3 components. So it has a red component, a green component, and a blue component. And then each pixel on the layer on top of it also has a red component, and a green component, and a blue component. Now, you can think of each of those components as a number, and what multiply filter does is, for each channel, it does multiplication. So it does this times this, it's going to be the result. And to better understand this, imagine if it wasn't a number from 0 to 255, but it was a number from 0 to 1. So 0 to 1 as well, and then B from 0 to 1. Right, so now if I have nothing but the blue channel on this, and I multiply it with 100, with 100 opacity, it's going to multiply these 2 blues. So this is 1 times 1 equals 1, and then this is 0 times 1, it equals 0. So this way I've only filtered the blue channel from the original image. And then if I make it not full blue, but less blue, so if I took this blue and then slid this down, I would then have, for example, half a blue, and that would not only leave the blue channel from the original image, it would also make it half as dark. So, oops. So that's the idea behind the paint modes. And that's what I could use multiply to for. Now, multiply can't make things brighter, because multiply is at the, because of that 0, 1, the maximum you can multiply by is 1, and 1 just keeps whatever is. So this is a darkening filter. So as you can see, I can use it for shading, and, works pretty well. So could I do something like this? I'd like to have this be a normal opacity like that, and then can I create I know Krita has something called clone layers. So if I create a clone layer, can I now set this layer to invisible and the clone layer to multiply? I think I can. And the purpose for this is so I can edit the original layer and have the clone layer be the actual, you know, applied shadow. And then I just draw on the original one. Yeah, and then I can always enable and draw on the original one. Which is a very convenient setup because I just do this and I preview what the shadow looks like, and I do this and I can now add, for example, a second shade easily. So like, you know, should also be blue but darker. And then I can easily, you know, pick this color, you know, and work with it. And then if I want to preview what the shading I've done is going to look like, I can also easily do that by just turning this layer off for a quick second. And now you can maybe see the two shades. Or can you? Can't really. If I up the opacity, can you tell that there's two different colors? You kind of can, but not really. Because the most important change is reducing the red and green channels, which are actually high, I think, for brown like this. So it's not as important whether it's a dark or light shade of blue for the shadow, but it would make more sense if I slid towards something that has more specific color selector. You can see that this has full blue and less green and red, so I can select that I would like more red and green for my other shade, and then draw this on another thing. And now this is a shade that is also going to be shaded, like, but less, because I actually am reducing the channels, each channel by less. So if something like this, there hopefully should be a noticeable change on the actual result. We'll see in a hot second as I just fondle my way through this. So like this could, for example, be a lighter shadow because it's you know, it's just a plant. Now if I turn this off, I've got, yeah, you can way more easily see that there's actually two shades to this. And like that, I could also, you know, bring in a gradient. So like I could filter, blur. This is gonna look ugly, but bear with me for a hot second. If I could, you know, blur this, that's cloned, you know, this yields soft shadows, which I could use perhaps. There's a chance for this to be used. So that could be used for the soft shadow shading technique. I might use a combination of those two. I might use a combination of softer shadows for like bigger planes, and then hard shadows for areas like here on the skin, or maybe like dividing the hat in two. So like facing towards the front and facing towards the side could be divided with a harsher shade difference, less blur. And then could also, on top of that, be, I could stack another gradient that kind of shades it. Yeah, it's a very computer approach to shading, I think. But what the hell? But you know what? I don't think it's too bad. So I'm thinking this is a decent cutoff point for this one. You know, I actually kind of lied. I want to drop the saturation slightly on this tree. It's bothering me slightly. It's like just like that. It's slight, but it's important. Because I'd like to, you know, export this. Yeah, and this is slightly too much. Okay. Well, let me crop it before I finish. So, of course, I'll restore the crop. But you know what? Just bear with me as I have the right. I have the right of. Yeah, no. You see, this is a good indicator that this is a great moment to stop. So when I'm starting to slur my words like that, when I'm messing stuff up, it's time to stop, brother. Okay, this is 90.png. We're gonna save it. We're gonna update that later. I'm gonna post it somewhere, probably, maybe link it in the description. Yeah, so a lot of rambling tonight. Some nice texture work, some nice nice work on this tree here. I quite like how this looks. I think I've gotten better at rendering trees over time, and I hope to actually slowly improve, maybe even quickly improve, who knows, over time. But yeah, it's been a pleasure to talk into the void a bit tonight, and yeah, hope you've had fun. If you're on the VOD, good night or something. If you are on the stream, I don't think you are. You are probably lying. So no good night to you. But good